Go.
Francis Ford Coppola's new big passion project, Megalopolis, premieres in theaters across the country this month. And I'm really excited to see it. Not because I've heard reviews of how amazing the movie is, or because I'm a super huge Coppola fan outside of the widely acclaimed masterpieces he directed back in the 70s. No, the reason I'm excited to see it is because every single bit of info that I've heard about this movie has been Looney Tunes. I have lived on this earth for 28 years, and in all 10,220 of those days in which I have drawn breath, I have never heard of a movie surrounded by so much bonkers what-the-fuck energy before listening to the drip feed of news from this production. Scripts getting rewritten on the day of shooting, the director holed up in his trailer smoking weed for days on end, the premiere getting equal amounts of cheers and boos at the Cannes Film Festival, which almost never happens, and all sorts of other bizarre stories to do with both the production and the screening of the film itself. In fact, the only major movie releases I can think of with this much insane background are other Coppola films. Now, I don't think I need to introduce Francis Ford Coppola to anybody. We all know his most famous groundbreaking works like The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, and The Conversation. This man has earned his feathers as a master filmmaker and a titan in the industry. And yet, the last few decades of his career haven't left as much of an impact as his earlier years. Since the early 2000s, Coppola's films have become much more art house and experimental, and haven't really connected with general audiences as well as his earlier works. More recent works of his, like Twixt, Tetro, and Youth Without Youth, aimed for a much more niche viewership and engaged in more avant-garde premises and techniques than critics or general audiences were really comfortable engaging with. One of the infamous stunts surrounding Twixt, for instance, was Coppola's live editing of the movie during screenings that he tailored to the reactions of audiences in real time. Yes, you heard me right. This lunatic madman edited a movie live while people were watching it in the theater. As a general stereotype, this kind of eccentricity is often associated with small-time art house directors and film school students who try to use shallow gimmicks and tricks to make their work seem more artistically substantive than it actually is. This kind of flamboyant filmmaking style can come off as pretentious, and it's the easiest way to alienate general audiences from watching your movies. So it's not a surprise that Coppola's career has dragged over the last couple decades from doubling down on that style. In fact, Megalopolis stands to be his first major motion picture since 2011, a hiatus of 13 straight years. So okay, you might be saying to yourself, if this guy's movies are so weird and he hasn't even made one in over a decade, then why is it something I'd be interested in? Well, to be completely candid, you might not. At least, not in the way you might be excited to see a really good movie, but perhaps in the way you might be interested in seeing a crazy, bizarre clusterfuck of a movie, whether it turns out to be good or bad. I think this is going to be the type of movie that rubs a lot of people the wrong way, in one way or another. And there's a lot about the trailers that raise red flags for me as well. Nonetheless, I'd like to try and make a case for why this movie deserves to be seen, even by people who aren't likely to enjoy it. First off, this is not just a Francis Ford Coppola movie. This is apparently his biggest ever passion project that he has been working on since 1977. It's a story that takes place in a fictional American metropolis called New Rome, which takes inspiration both from modern New York City and from the Roman Empire, specifically from the story of the Catiline Conspiracy, and Rome's transformation from a republic into an empire. There's also something to do with time manipulation or some weird sci-fi shit, I don't know. A lot about this movie has been kept under wraps. But Coppola reportedly spent over $200 million of his own personal finances to get this film made and marketed. Now, the last few years have taught us a pretty clear lesson about big-budget movies. Just because you pour hundreds of millions of dollars into something doesn't mean it's gonna come out good. In fact, the general rule seems to actually be the opposite. So the budgetary scale of the film isn't itself an indication of its quality or chances of success. but I have a soft spot in my heart for artists who are willing to put their own stuff on the line for a story they believe in. Earlier this year, I went to the movies to go see Kevin Costner's 3-hour Western epic Horizon: An American Saga, which was a massive bomb at the box office and received a lukewarm critical response. Which is not terribly surprising. It's a 3-hour-long movie in a genre that's been long outdated to all but the oldest demographics, and it was the first of a 4-part consecutively shot series that didn't really have any hype around it at all. In fact, the lack of audience interest was so overwhelming that the studio pulled the theatrical release of the upcoming sequel, which was slated to be released just a couple months later, after the first film's premiere, which is something I've never seen or heard of before. Now, this movie is heavily flawed, both from a conceptual and an execution standpoint, and I never would have gone to see that movie at all if Kevin Costner hadn't sunk millions of his own money and mortgaged his home to finance it. Was it a smart investment? No, obviously not. And is Kevin Costner a storytelling genius? Survey says nay. But goddammit, I have to show some respect to a filmmaker who's willing to go all out and put not only their reputation, but their money on the line for a story they desperately want to tell. And that's the main reason I want to go see Megalopolis. Not just because the stuff I've heard about it is crazy, or I want to see what's so incredibly polarizing about it, but because Francis Ford Coppola, whatever else you might say about him, is taking a gargantuan risk for the sake of his passion. I'm going to see it because I want to support this kind of courage, and because I want to see what bizarre out-of-pocket shit Coppola has cooked up with this movie. And who knows? It might actually be amazing. For better or worse, Coppola himself claims that everything he's learned about filmmaking has gone into this movie. And that's a pretty lofty statement coming from the guy responsible for some of the best works in the history of cinema. Now, if you really just don't care that much, then there's not much I can say to sell this movie to you, other than that you'll probably have a lot of fun with it, whether it's a masterpiece or a train wreck. So think about seeing Megalopolis, and come back here and let me know what you thought about it when you have.